I used to think the most dangerous sentence in marriage was something dramatic, something with fireworks, something like, "We need to talk," or "I'm not happy," or the classic horror movie line, "He's just a friend." Turns out, I was wrong. The most dangerous sentence in my marriage was said over roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a bottle of wine we bought because the label looked expensive. You never asked the right questions. At the time, I laughed. When your wife says something weird during a perfectly normal Tuesday dinner, your first instinct is not, "Ah, yes, this must be the opening line to the collapse of my entire marriage." Your first instinct is usually, "That was oddly dramatic for someone currently stealing fries off my plate." Her name was Claire, and if you looked at us from the outside, we were painfully normal. We had the kind of marriage people describe with words like stable, settled, and solid, which are also words used for office furniture and small-town bank buildings. We had routines. I left for work around the same time every morning. She worked part-time from home, which meant she had flexible hours and the supernatural ability to answer emails while also watching reality shows where rich women screamed in kitchens larger than our living room. I handled groceries half the time, cooked when I had the energy, pretended I understood throw pillows, and took the trash out with the kind of consistency that should have earned me a municipal award. That night, I came home late, loosened my tie, and sat down at the table while Claire poured wine into my glass like she was auditioning for a commercial where women gracefully recover from stress by tilting bottles at sunset. "Tough day?" she asked. "Depends," I said. "If you mean professionally, yes. If you mean spiritually, also yes. Greg scheduled a meeting to discuss why productivity is down, which naturally killed the remaining productivity." She smirked. "How tragic. Did you survive?" "Barely. I may never be the same man again. One more pie chart and I'm relocating to a lighthouse where spreadsheets can't find me." She laughed, and for a while it was just normal. Plates, cutlery, small talk, the TV humming in the other room. I told her I might have to stay late the next day. "Tomorrow's going to be a mess," I said. "Martin wants numbers by the afternoon, so I'll probably get stuck there." She looked up. "How late?" "I don't know, maybe 7, maybe later." "What time are you leaving in the morning?" I shrugged. "Same as always, around 8. "You going straight there?" "Yes, Claire. I'm not making a ceremonial stop at the Grand Canyon." She ignored that. "And after work? Straight home?" "Probably, unless I need to stop by the store." "What store?" I looked at her. "A mysterious one, very exclusive. They sell milk and bread to chosen men." She smiled, but her eyes stayed on me. "What time would you be home if you stop?" "I don't know, 7:30? 8? She nodded slowly, like a woman receiving important intelligence from a field agent. I took a sip of wine and raised an eyebrow. "Why do you need my full flight schedule?" That got the little half smile, not the warm one, not the amused one, the one that showed up when she thought she was cleverer than everybody else in the room and was being generous enough not to say it out loud. "You never asked the right questions," she said. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because what else was I supposed to do? Slam my glass down and demand clarification like I was interrogating a Bond villain? So I pointed at her with my fork and said, "That sounded incredibly sinister." She gave one tiny shrug and cut into her chicken. "Did it?" "Yes, a little. I feel like I should check the basement for a hostage now." Claire smiled into her plate. "Maybe you should." That should have been the moment I stopped chewing. Instead, I grinned and said, "See, now that's worse. That's so much worse." She finally laughed for real at that, and the moment passed. The next day at work, somewhere between pretending to care about quarterly projections and wondering if my coffee had been filtered through drywall, that sentence floated back into my head. "You never ask the right questions." It was one of those lines that gets stuck because it sounds deeper than the conversation deserved. At lunch, Claire texted me. "What time do you think you'll leave?" I stared at the screen. I typed, "Probably around 6:30. "Why?" She replied almost immediately. "Just planning dinner. Normal answer. Suspiciously reasonable answer. I told myself to stop being weird. Spouses ask about schedules. That's what adults do. They coordinate. They plan. Still, once I noticed it, I started noticing it more. A day later, she called me around 5. "Hey," she said. "You leaving soon?" "Romantic," I said. Not even a "hello, handsome," just logistics. "Hello, handsome. You leaving soon?" I could hang up and preserve the mystery. She laughed. "Are you?" "In about 20 minutes. Can you text me before you head out?" That specific wording hit me strangely, though I couldn't have told you why. "Before I head out?" "Yeah, just so I know." "So you can light candles and scatter rose petals?" "Sure," she said dryly. "That's exactly what's happening." "Good, because if I come home and there are no petals, I'm filing a complaint." She hung up on me. Loving marriage stuff. That night when I got home, dinner was already on the stove. Everything seemed normal. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, stole one of the fries I'd picked up on the way home, and acted like a woman with absolutely nothing to hide, which, in hindsight, I should say, is one of the greatest performances I have ever witnessed. Over the next couple of weeks, the questions kept coming. "You heading home soon? Still at the office? Can you text me when you leave? Are you going straight home? How long will it take you?" A few of them would have been nothing. 10 of them starts to feel like customer service for your own arrival. One evening I told her, "I'll be home around 7. "Perfect," she said instantly. I remember standing there in the kitchen with my car keys in hand, looking at her while she wiped down the counter. "Perfect?" I said. She glanced over. "What?" "You said that like a supervillain who just heard the guards change shifts." Claire rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, I meant dinner will be ready by then." "Ah, good. Because for a second there, I thought maybe you had a hostage in the garage and needed to move him before I got back." She smiled, but she didn't really respond. Just went back to the counter. That should have reassured me. Instead, it gave me the same feeling you get when a painting looks straight until you notice it's slightly crooked, and then you can't see anything else. The thing about suspicion is that once it enters the room, it sits down and helps itself to a drink. I started replaying old conversations in my head. At first, it was nothing concrete, just fragments. Her asking what time I'd be home after a work dinner. Her asking whether I was going straight to the airport or stopping for gas first. Her asking me to call before I drove back from a weekend conference. Her asking if traffic was bad when I said I was leaving late. One memory by itself was harmless. A whole chain of them started to look like a pattern. Then one afternoon, out of pure curiosity that I absolutely pretended was accidental, I scrolled back through our texts. Not years, just a few months. There they were. "Text me before you leave work. Let me know when you're in the car. Are you coming straight home? How far out are you? Call me when you're on your way." I sat at my desk, staring at the correspondence. And for the first time, the thought slipped in. What if she wasn't asking because she wanted me home? What if she was asking because she needed to know exactly when I started moving? I hated the thought immediately. Not because it was impossible, because it made too much sense too fast. So I did what every sane husband does when a terrible idea starts sounding plausible. I argued with myself. Maybe she liked knowing when to heat up dinner. Maybe she wanted to shower before I got back. Maybe she didn't want to vacuum when I was on the way. Maybe she was coordinating some harmless little domestic thing, and I was turning into one of those paranoid men who sees betrayal because the shampoo bottle moved half an inch. By the time I got home that evening, I had almost convinced myself I was being ridiculous. Claire was in the living room with one leg tucked under her, laptop open, some home renovation show playing in the background, where a cheerful couple was pretending crown molding could save their marriage. "How was work?" she asked. "Spiritually violent?" I said. She smiled. "That bad?" Greg used the phrase "circle back" 4 times before noon. "I'm entitled to compensation." She laughed. Poor thing. I dropped into the chair across from her and watched her for a second. She looked comfortable, relaxed, pretty in that easy, familiar way that makes you hate your own suspicions because they feel like an insult to the life you built. Then she looked up from the laptop. What? Nothing. That earned me a narrowed look. You're being weird. I'm being observant. That's new. See? I pointed at her. Comments like that, this is why I can never relax. She snorted and shook her head. Then, right on schedule, she asked, You have to stay late tomorrow too? I tried to sound casual. Probably. How late? Not sure. She closed the laptop. Can you let me know before you leave? There it was again. Before you leave. That exact phrase. I smiled, but I felt something shift inside me. Sure, I said. Why? She shrugged. So I know when to start dinner. Claire, if dinner timing matters this much, we may need to get you a wall chart. She laughed. You're impossible. I stood, walked over, kissed the top of her head, and let the conversation die. But that night in bed, while she slept facing the other way and rain tapped softly against the window, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. You never asked the right questions. I started asking them. Not out loud, not yet. Just to myself. Why did she care about departure time more than arrival time? Why did she need a text right before I drove? The next morning, while brushing my teeth, I looked at myself in the mirror and said, You need to either stop acting insane or commit properly. There's something sobering about giving yourself advice while holding a toothbrush. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse her. I wasn't going to go through her phone while she showered. I wasn't planning on hiring a private detective. I was just going to test the pattern. A small lie. A harmless one. That evening over dinner I said, Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Martin wants me to stay late. I'll probably be there until 9. Claire looked up from her plate. 9? Maybe later. She made a face. That sucks. Tell me about it. If I don't make it home, avenge me. I'll do my best, she said. She smiled, but I watched carefully. No panic, no strange tension, no visible calculation, just the normal, sympathetic wife expression. Maybe that should have reassured me. Instead, it challenged me. Because if there was something going on, she was very good. And if there wasn't, then I was about to feel like the dumbest man alive for playing detective in a marriage that only needed therapy and maybe less red wine. The next day, I left work at 6. Not 9. Not even close. As I drove home, my pulse was embarrassingly loud for a man whose best-case scenario was proving himself paranoid. I remember gripping the wheel too tightly and muttering, "This is stupid! This is so stupid!" I got to the house, parked, sat there for a second, then went inside as quietly as possible. Nothing. No strange car in the driveway, no mysterious shoes by the door, no deep male voice from the kitchen, no sprinting footsteps, no dramatic affair soundtrack, just Claire on the couch in lounge pants, a blanket over her legs, watching some crime show while eating chips out of a bowl she absolutely expected me not to touch. She looked up, frowned, and paused the TV. "You're home early." There was no fear in her face, just surprise, mild annoyance even. "You said 9. Wrapped up faster than I thought." "Huh." She shifted under the blanket. "Well, okay." That was it. No panic, no cover story, no perfume cloud hiding a shirtless accountant in the laundry room. I stood there for a second feeling like a complete idiot. Claire studied my face. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I forced a shrug. "Like what?" "As if you were expecting to see anyone here." I laughed too quickly. "What, and take all the fun out of marriage?" She gave me a strange look, then picked up the remote again. "You're weird." Understatement of the year. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge for no reason, and stood there staring at yogurt like it had betrayed me personally. Nothing looked off. Everything looked painfully normal. I almost felt relief. Almost. But not quite. Because even as I stood there, trying to shame myself back into sanity, one thought kept scratching at the back of my head. If I was wrong, why did I still feel like I hadn't actually tested the right thing? For the next few days, I tried very hard to behave like a normal husband. I convinced myself that my experiment had failed, which meant I was just paranoid. But something still bothered me. The questions kept coming. What time are you leaving work today? Are you going straight home? Can you text me when you leave? But after a while, it stopped feeling like coordination, started feeling like timing. And the more I thought about it, the more one detail bothered me. I spent 3 days telling myself that was stupid. On the 4th day, I stopped pretending. If something was actually going on, testing it after work didn't make sense. Evenings were predictable, workdays were not. So the following Tuesday, I did something that felt both ridiculous and completely necessary. I took the day off. Not a big dramatic announcement, no vacation planning, no telling Claire I needed time to think about life. Just a quiet email to my boss. Taking a personal day. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji, which is corporate language for, as long as the spreadsheet still exists tomorrow, I do not care. That morning I followed the normal routine exactly. Alarm, shower, coffee. Claire was in the kitchen wearing one of my old hoodies, leaning against the counter while scrolling through her phone. "Big day?" she asked. "Tragically," I said. "Greg scheduled 3 meetings and I suspect 2 of them exist purely to justify the first one." She smirked. "Sounds awful. It's basically psychological warfare." I grabbed my keys. As I walked toward the door, she looked up. "What time do you think you'll leave today?" There it was again. That question. Every time. I kept my voice casual. "Probably around 6. Text me when you leave?" I forced a small grin. "Of course. Wouldn't want to disrupt the national dinner schedule." She rolled her eyes. "Just tell me." "Sure." Then I walked out, got in the car, and drove away like a perfectly obedient husband, heading off to another exciting day of emails and pie charts. Except instead of turning toward the office, I drove to a small coffee shop about 15 minutes away. The kind of place with uncomfortable wooden chairs and music that sounded like someone softly arguing with an acoustic guitar. I bought a coffee I didn't want and sat near the window. For the first hour, I kept thinking how stupid this was. There are many ways to discover your marriage might have problems. Spying on your own house at 11 in the morning was not one I had imagined for myself, but the thought kept circling back. The pattern, the timing, the way she always wanted to know when the drive started. Around noon, I checked the time again. If I was wrong, nothing would happen. I would drive home, find an empty house, and spend the afternoon feeling like a man who had successfully invented a conspiracy theory about his own wife, which frankly would still be embarrassing. But if I was right. I finished the coffee, which tasted like regret and burnt beans, and got up. The drive back to our neighborhood felt longer than usual. Not physically longer, just heavier. My brain kept flipping between 2 completely different futures. In one of them, this was nothing. I was about to walk into a quiet house and spend the rest of the day apologizing to the universe for doubting someone who didn't deserve it. In the other future, I didn't even finish that thought. When I turned onto our street, the first thing I noticed was the car. Silver sedan, parked halfway down the curb near our house. Not directly in front of it, but close enough that it clearly belonged to someone visiting. I slowed the car automatically. After living somewhere for years, you start recognizing every regular vehicle on the street without even trying. The old pickup 2 houses down, the blue SUV that never moves, Mrs. Klein's tiny white hatchback that somehow occupies 3 parking spots at once. This one was different, newer, clean, not something I'd ever seen on this street before. And it was parked just far enough from our driveway to look casual, not suspicious, just visiting. My stomach tightened. I kept driving past the house, slowly. Just another car on the street. Nothing to see here. Except the closer I got, the the more certain I felt that the car didn't belong to anyone nearby. The engine was off, windows slightly tinted, no one inside. I drove to the end of the street, turned around, and came back. The sedan hadn't moved. Still there. Still quiet. Still unfamiliar. I pulled into my driveway and shut off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the steering wheel. Maybe it was a delivery. Maybe someone was visiting the neighbors. Maybe I was about to walk into my own house and discover that I had officially become the paranoid husband in a bad daytime TV drama. I took a breath, got out of the car. The street was quiet. Early afternoon silence. No kids, no traffic, just wind moving through the trees. As I walked up to the front door, I glanced once more at the silver sedan. Still there, still parked, still wrong. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house looked normal. Too normal. Sunlight coming through the living room window. The faint smell of coffee. The TV off. For a moment, I wondered if Claire had simply stepped out. Then I heard something. A sound upstairs. Movement. Not loud, but definitely not the sound of an empty house. And suddenly the silver sedan outside didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It felt like evidence. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds after hearing the noise upstairs. Not moving, just listening. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Floorboards shifting. Something scraping softly. A muffled laugh. The kind of noise people make when they think they're alone in a house in the middle of a workday. For a moment, I considered walking straight upstairs, kicking the door open, creating one of those dramatic scenes people talk about for years afterward at family gatherings. But then another thought arrived, calm and very clear. If I walked upstairs right now, I'd get chaos. Shouting, denials, someone grabbing clothes, someone telling me I misunderstood what I had very obviously not misunderstood. And the truth would dissolve into a screaming match. That suddenly sounded exhausting. So instead, I turned around, walked quietly back to the front door, stepped outside, closed it behind me. I crossed the driveway and got back into my car. From where I was parked, I could see the silver sedan down the street, still sitting there, still looking like it belonged to someone who had absolutely no idea their afternoon schedule was about to become the most important part of my week. I leaned back in the seat and waited. If someone was in my house, they would eventually leave. People have jobs. Lunch breaks end. Affairs apparently run on a timetable. 10 minutes passed, then 15. For a brief moment, I wondered if I'd misheard everything and the noise upstairs had been a window shifting or the neighbor dropping something. Then the front door opened, and a man stepped outside. He didn't run. He didn't look nervous. He walked out with the relaxed confidence of someone leaving a place he had visited before. He closed the door gently behind him and walked toward the silver sedan. My brain took a second to process what my eyes were seeing. Because I recognized him, not a stranger, not some random guy from a bar. It was Daniel, the husband of Claire's friend Melissa. I had shaken this man's hand in my own backyard. We'd stood next to the grill one summer talking about baseball while burgers burned because neither of us were paying attention. He had once borrowed my ladder, and now he was walking away from my house on a Tuesday afternoon like he'd just finished a perfectly normal visit. I felt something strange then. Not rage. Not the explosive kind anyway. More like a quiet pressure inside my chest. Like something heavy had just settled there permanently. Daniel reached the sedan, opened the door, and paused for a second. That was when I pulled my phone out. I snapped a picture. The silver sedan. The license plate clearly visible. Daniel getting into the driver's seat. Evidence. He started the engine and drove off without ever noticing me sitting in my own driveway, watching him leave my marriage. The street went quiet again. I stayed in the car for another minute. Then another. I finally got out and went back inside. The house was quiet again. No movement upstairs now, no laughter, just the normal stillness of an empty weekday home. Claire was in the kitchen when I walked in. She turned, surprised. "Oh." That same tone from before, You're home. Yeah. She glanced at the clock on the wall. I thought you'd be at work. Wrapped up early. She studied me for a second, not suspicious, just curious. Well, she said, turning back toward the counter, that's convenient? Convenient. Interesting word. I stood there watching her for a moment. The woman who, 30 minutes earlier, had been upstairs with the husband of one of her friends. She looked completely normal. Hair tied up, coffee mug in her hand. The same casual calm she had every other day. If I hadn't seen Daniel walk out of the house myself, I might have believed nothing had happened. But I had seen it. I had the picture sitting in my phone. Claire looked over again. You okay? She asked. Yeah. You look like you're thinking. I am. That's never good. I smiled slightly. Work stuff. She nodded and went back to scrolling through her phone. Conversation over. I went upstairs. Our bedroom looked perfectly ordinary. Bed made. Curtains half open. No obvious signs that two people had been here doing anything that would permanently destroy a marriage. People are very good at cleaning up evidence when they think they have time. I stood there for a moment anyway. Then I went back downstairs. Claire was still in the kitchen. I'm going back out for a bit, I said. She looked up. Work? Something like that. Okay. No suspicion, no concern. She didn't even ask where I was going, which, ironically, was the first time in weeks she hadn't asked about my schedule. I left the house again, got into the car, and drove straight to a lawyer's office. The consultation took less than an hour. Apparently, when you walk into a lawyer's office with a photo of your wife's friend's husband, leaving your house in the middle of the day, the paperwork moves fairly quickly. By the end of the week, the divorce documents were ready. I didn't tell Claire. Not yet. She kept living exactly the same way she always had. Still asking about my schedule. Still wanting to know when I left work. Still telling me to text her when I was heading home. The difference was that now every question sounded different. One evening she called me around 5. You leaving soon? Probably. Text me when you go? Sure. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Every time she asked about my schedule now, it felt almost funny. Not the happy kind of funny, the kind where the joke only makes sense after you've seen the punchline. A few days later, the lawyer emailed me. The documents were finished. All I had to do was deliver them. That's when I decided how I wanted to end it. No arguments, no speeches, just timing. The following Tuesday, I took another day off. Claire didn't notice anything unusual that morning. Same routine, same coffee, same casual questions. What time do you think you'll be home? Later than usual, I said. Text me when you leave? Of course. I left the house like I was going to work. Waited an hour, then drove back. As I turned onto our street, I saw it again. The silver sedan. Same car. Parked near our house like it belonged there. For a moment I almost admired the consistency. Some people have routines. Apparently so did my wife. I parked the car quietly and got out. The street was silent. I walked up to the front door and unlocked it. Inside the house, everything looked calm. Sunlight across the living room floor. Kitchen empty. Then I heard it again. Movement upstairs. A soft laugh. The unmistakable sound of a bed shifting. I walked up the stairs slowly. No rush. No anger. Just the steady feeling of a man finishing something that had already ended. At the top of the stairs, I paused outside the bedroom door. More movement. A voice. Daniel's voice. I opened the door. Both of them froze. Claire on the bed. Daniel halfway through pulling on a shirt. The room went silent. For a second, nobody said anything. Then Claire's eyes widened. What? I walked in, calm, and set the envelope down on the bed. Don't worry, I said. I'm not here to argue. They both stared at the envelope. Claire slowly picked it up. What is this? Divorce papers. The room stayed silent. Daniel looked like a man who had just realized the afternoon had taken a sharp turn toward legal consequences. Claire opened the envelope with shaking hands. I watched her read the first page. Then I said the only thing that felt appropriate. You two clearly already worked out the schedule. And for the first time since this whole thing started, nobody had any questions left to ask. Claire stared at the papers like they were written in a language she didn't recognize. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint rustle of the pages in her hands. Daniel was still standing next to the bed, holding his shirt like it had suddenly become the most confusing object in the world. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Daniel cleared his throat, the universal signal of a man who desperately wants to stop existing for the next 5 minutes. Listen, he said. This isn't... I raised a hand. Daniel, I said calmly, if you finish that sentence with the phrase, what it looks like, I'm going to assume you also think gravity is optional. He stopped talking. Claire looked between us. You were spying on me? That one actually made me laugh. Claire, I said, I walked into my own house. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean, I said. And no, I wasn't spying. I nodded toward the window. His car is parked outside. You're both in my bed. I'm not Sherlock Holmes, I just showed up. Daniel shifted awkwardly. I should probably... Yes, I said. That's an excellent idea. He grabbed his shoes and headed for the door like a man escaping a building that might collapse. Halfway out, he paused. Look, man. Daniel. Yeah? Go. He nodded quickly and disappeared down the hallway. A few seconds later, I heard the front door open, then close, then silence again. Claire was still sitting on the bed, holding the divorce papers like they might explode. This is insane, she said. No, I said. This is paperwork. You're overreacting. Am I? You can't just walk in here and... Claire. She stopped. I looked at her for a moment. It's strange how quickly your perspective changes once something breaks. 2 weeks earlier, I would have been trying to explain myself. Now I was just tired. You're in our bedroom, I said calmly, with someone else's husband. She looked away. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. She stood up. You don't even want to talk about this? What would we talk about? About why this happened. I laughed again, quieter this time. You mean the part where you ask about my work schedule every day so you know when the house is free? Her expression changed, just slightly. A small flicker of surprise, which told me something very interesting. She hadn't realized I'd figured that part out. You're imagining things, she said. Claire. What? I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the photo. The silver sedan. The license plate. Daniel climbing into the driver's seat. I held the screen up. Her face went pale. That was last week, I said. When I took the day off. She didn't answer, because there wasn't much left to say. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. So what happens now? I shrugged. Now you sign the papers. And that's it? Pretty much. You're just throwing everything away? That one actually annoyed me. I pushed off the dresser and walked toward the door. Claire, I said, stopping in the hallway, you already threw it away. I'm just cleaning up the paperwork. I stepped outside, walked down the driveway, and got into my car. The silver sedan was still parked halfway down the street. Daniel was standing next to it, looking like a man who had just realized life was about to get significantly more complicated. When he saw me get in my car, he quickly got inside his. The engine started. The sedan pulled away. And just like that, the street was quiet again. I sat there for a moment, staring at the empty space where the car had been. Then I shook my head slightly. The funny thing was, Claire had spent weeks asking about my schedule. Every single day. What time are you leaving work? Are you heading straight home? Text me when you leave. Turns out my schedule really was important to her. Just not for the reasons I thought. The good news was she wouldn't need to worry about it anymore. The divorce itself moved surprisingly fast. Apparently, when two people get caught in the middle of a weekday afternoon with divorce papers already sitting on the bed, the motivation to drag things out isn't very strong. Claire didn't fight it. There were a few cold conversations, some awkward exchanges about logistics, and a lot of silence where normal couples might have had arguments. Within a few months, it was over. Papers signed, assets divided, house sold. The strange part was how ordinary the process felt, like closing an account you no longer used. Daniel's situation, however, turned out to be far less quiet. Because when his wife Melissa found out what had been happening, she didn't discover it through careful observation or clever detective work. She discovered it because I told her, not out of revenge, not out of anger, just because she deserved to know that the man she had been married to was apparently spending his lunch breaks in my house. Melissa took the news about as calmly as you'd expect someone to take that kind of information, which is to say, she didn't. From what I heard later, Daniel's life became very complicated very quickly. Lawyers got involved. A few weeks later, she filed for divorce. So in the end, the silver sedan managed to wreck 2 marriages instead of 1. I don't know what happened to Claire and Daniel after that. And honestly, I never cared enough to find out. The only thing I know for sure is that for months Claire kept asking about my schedule. What time are you leaving? When will you be home? Text me when you head back. Turns out timing really was important to her, just not in the way she expected it to be. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.